Here's 2 tips that will take your music production to the next level. So let's get into it. So I know as a music producer early on, creativity is really high and a lot of the tracks you make are going to stem from ideas that you have in your mind, which is good, but eventually you get to a point where you feel like you're plateauing or you get writer's block and can't think of any more good ideas. And that's where this first tip comes into play, and that is to find a song in your genre and try to recreate it as best as possible. This tip was game-changing for me when I first gave it a shot because 1, it'll give you a better idea of how to mix your songs to make it sound like a professional, successful track, and 2, it might give you some ideas for tracks or presets that you can save for later. But first, here's some things that you should just keep in mind before giving this a shot yourself. Make sure that the track that you choose is by an artist who is established and has quality tracks. It wouldn't be as helpful if you choose a song that isn't mixed to a professional standard, so just keep that in mind. And next thing is, you probably won't get it to sound exactly like the track you're referencing, and that's fine because everyone's going to have their own techniques and it's going to be nearly impossible to replicate all the processing or sound design an artist might have, but you should still aim to make it as close as possible. And last thing I'll say is that when you're done recreating the song, I'll usually mess around with the melody, BPM, chords, etc. And usually I'll add my own spin to it to make it unique, and bam, you got yourself a new work in progress, and now you know how to mix things better because you already went through the process of balancing things. And now I'll go into my DAW and show you how I set things up. So here I have my reference track that's in my genre, and of course I supported the artist by buying the track from iTunes, which I highly encourage you to do the same. And also my producers who struggle with music theory, I'll try to give you some tips that'll help you in this process. So first, I'll usually figure out what chords the artist is using, and you can find out a couple different ways. One way is to low pass the sub-frequencies and use a tuner to find out the bass notes. Now this way isn't foolproof, but you can get the job done most of the time. Sometimes the tuner might pick up different notes, so just try different notes and see if they sound the same as the reference. Another way is to go on a website like Chordify, and it'll tell you exactly what chords the artist is using. Now this method will only work for bigger and more popular tracks, but you should be choosing those types of songs as your references anyway. And yeah, from there I'll make the chords, then the melody, and just experiment until I build up the track as close to the reference as possible. And just to make things easier, I'll usually know the key and BPM of the track, which can easily be found with a Google search. And again, if the track is big enough, which it should be, it'll come up, and I'll usually go into my MIDI and change the key to fit the reference. And now that you know all the notes in the MIDI follow the key of your track, now you don't have to try to avoid certain notes. And again, keep in mind there's no perfect way to do this, but this is just one way that I found worked for me. And if you know a better way, drop it down in the comments for everyone to know. Now on to the next tip. Now this one is similar to the first one, but slightly different, and is just as important as the first, and that is to use a reference track for mastering. Now this one's a little bit different because the reference tracks come into play at the end of the mastering stage, so let me paint the picture a little bit better for you. So you've just finished mastering a banger and you're unsure if everything is balanced and sounding professional. This is where you bring in a reference track and listen to them side by side to see if there's anything that needs fixing to make it sound as balanced as the reference. For me personally, I'll usually look for different things. For example, is my bass too loud or too quiet? Is my top end sounding crispy enough? Do I need some more compression, etc.? And at this stage in my career, I know of things to look out for, but with practice, this is something that you can develop as well because, practice makes perfect. So here's a reference track that I have, and I'll usually route it to external out, which can be different depending on the DAW you're using, but pretty much I just have it to an external output just so that it doesn't go through my mastering chain and I can hear it for what it is since it's already a mastered professional track. Now keep in mind there's plugins that allow you to reference tracks easier, but this is just the method I've been using and it's worked for me and it's free. And now that I have my reference track routed, I usually will pull up a Spectrum Analyzer plugin like Span, which is also free, and I'll usually look to see if my spectrum lines up with the reference track, and if I have any weird spikes in any certain frequency range, I'll go in and manually fix it until they look similar. But at this stage for me, most of the time, I pull up Span for a second just to check it, but I'm mostly using my ears to see if the track is similarly balanced as the reference track. So yeah, just mess around and find a good method for you, but just make sure at some point you pull up a plugin like Span to compare, but ultimately use your ears because there's no better tool than your ears. And yeah, that's all the tips I have for this video. Thank you to everyone who made it this far. I hope these tips were as useful for me as it was for you. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I've got a lot more videos in the works, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So yeah, this is it for me. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.